All right, and welcome to Unofficially, the podcast of Wisconsin Badgers.
Emphasizing unofficially, we haven't settled on a title yet.
Yes. So I'm Evan Weller, and I'm here with Matt and Jordan, both very good friends and very devout Wisconsin fans. Matt, let's just start off. Give me your initial impression of the game today.
Well, first, you described me as a very devout Badger fan, and I would just like to stipulate that devotion does not equate to being a homer. So I'm going to speak truth to power during this podcast. But before I do that, I just want to re-emphasize, and I say re-emphasize because we just recorded about 11 minutes of a podcast that wasn't actually recording. So we're going to try to recreate lightning in a bottle here, but I want to re-emphasize the fact that, I appreciate being here with these two guys who are Badgers. We are the Wisconsin diaspora here in North Carolina, and speaking of North Carolina, there's an autumnal crisp in the air. Fall is upon us. It's my favorite season. I have on here a puffy vest. I'm feeling really good. I've got some nice crispy beers. But while spring is the time of new beginnings, fall heralds in a season of death and dying. And I love that because it's particularly symbolic for the Wisconsin season, right? So while the flora is dying and the fauna is retreating to higher ground for a long period of hibernation, the Wisconsin season, as we know it, is dead and gone. The era of Paul Chryst, thank God, is over. In nomine Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Right.
Matt, that was quite a monologue. Let me stop you there. Very impressive monologue, though. Great way, great intro. Great intro. But anyways, we're obviously a week behind on Paul Chryst news. 6 days old. Let's just go. Jordan, give me your thoughts. Was firing Paul Chryst the right decision? And if so, I guess when were you sort of on board with firing Paul?
Yeah, I think it was. Nothing against Paul. I think the looking at the team here over the last few years, the gap had widened from Ohio State, and that to me was the signal that it was time to move on. Okay,
so the Ohio State game for you, was that was the straw that broke the camel's back? Is that?
I think that's when I started thinking that it was probably time to go in another direction. I certainly didn't think it would be a week later.
Okay, right. Yeah, I mean, for me, like I said, the Illinois game was completely unforgivable, right? Losing 34-10, right, by 24 points on your home field to an Illinois team, right? An Illinois team, to Brett, like. I can even forgive for losing to Brett. Like, Brett obviously knows ins and outs of Wisconsin football. He obviously knows Paul. He probably had a pretty good idea what our game plan was going to be and how to defend against it. The thing that killed me was Ohio State. You can explain that game. You can write that off in the talent gap. Whatever, they have 64 and 5-star recruits. We don't. Mm-hmm. We are more talented than Illinois. So the only right way we're losing at home is the coaching. Right. That's it's not losing because we're right. It's not we're less talented than Illinois. And so it just came down to coaching.
So, but again, though, it's amazing that we can do this twice, right? Have the same conversation and not bring up the fact that we lost to Washington State. Now that, again, that to me is not when Paul Chryst should have lost his job. Right. I think that should have been done in 2019.
Yeah. So Matt,
but losing to Washington State in the second game of the season, non-conference opponent, what should have been an easy W, unforgivable. It is
to Washington State. So Washington State. 3-point loss to Washington State.
Again, doesn't matter. Anything you put in front of loss and Washington State, whether it's 3 points or 300 points, it shouldn't matter.
Okay.
We don't lose those games. Wisconsin does not lose those games.
Okay, let me push back a little bit. Wisconsin loses to BYU, right, at home a few years ago. I think Wisconsin at the time was ranked 4 in the country. Right?
2018.
2018, that's right. Yeah, we lose to BYU at home. To me, that loss was more embarrassing than Washington State game.
Was that the year we went on to go to the Big Ten championship game against Ohio State?
That was coming off of 2017 season where we lost Ohio State Big Ten championship game by whatever it was, 6 points. Yeah. So I guess that was also embarrassing. So for me, I guess, is it the fact that we're in year 8? Or is the fact that we're losing?
But maybe during, again, so Paul Chryst had at that point, been here 3 years. So,
right,
maybe he was still trading on some borrowed time there, and we were still trying to figure out whether the Paul Chryst era was going to work.
Right.
I think in retrospect, we know now that it didn't and it wouldn't.
Right.
I think, though, that, we had to make tough decisions. It was a little too late in the season for that to happen, right? So we lost to Washington State, and then we lost to Ohio State, and then we lost to Illinois. We should have had him fired right after the Washington State game for a whole number of reasons. Nonetheless, the performance of the team in that game.
Okay.
Right? We shouldn't have lost that game. But, and again, I used this analogy the first time when we had this discussion, but, the movie Signs with Mel Gibson. It's, was the ultimate letdown of an ending of a movie where you had these badass aliens coming in and taking over the world. That was Wisconsin football to me for the last decade and a half, is we could do anything. And then what do they end up losing to? What's their kryptonite? Water.
Right.
That was Paul Chryst with Brett Bielema. It's a pathetic ending to what was ultimately a pathetic tenure at Wisconsin.
Yeah. I just realized.
Did we really quantify the Paul Chryst tenure as
pathetic?
Pathetic.
Yes.
I mean, he took over for Gary Anderson. The program was somewhat in a
but
spiral.
He didn't take over for Gary Anderson. Gary Anderson kept the seat warm for a season or two after Brett Bielema before Paul Chryst. He didn't take over for Gary Anderson.
Quick anecdote, Jordan, before I forget. When Gary Anderson, we lose 59-0 to Ohio State in Big Ten championship. In my mind, that was the lowest point of Wisconsin football. I hate Ohio State so much. Losing 59-0 Ohio State, absolutely hated. Gary Anderson, obviously coach at the time. He's done after that game. I tweeted Paul Chryst after that game and said, "Please come back. Wisconsin needs you." Turned out I tweeted the wrong Paul Chryst, so maybe the.
I wish that other Paul Chryst, maybe he was like a chef or something. I wish he had come back and coach the team. Maybe we would have seen more results. But to answer your question, Jordan, yes, I would quantify Paul Chryst's tenure at Wisconsin as being inconsequential. Yes, does he have like the second or third most wins of any coach?
Right.
Yes, but I think that's more of a result of the quantity of his tenure and not the quality, right? I think he was, for a good portion of his career, he was living off of the recruiting chops of Bielema and others. I think he, as we've learned now, and is evidenced by the fact that Wisconsin, a historically conservative program, giving him a massive, 9-figure buyout.
Right.
Or 8-figure buyout.
Yeah.
9 figures.
Yeah, that would be impressive. Yeah.
But there's clearly been missteps, not just in the performance and the product on the field, but just recruiting issues that are going to continue to have a long-term impact on the integrity of this program. We know now he was not maintaining a recruiting department for a substantial portion of his tenure as coach. That is unforgivable. So yes, I would quantify his tenure at Wisconsin as a failure. I would quantify his manhood as a failure. I think he's a bum. I think he should get a job at Baskin Robbins.
Okay.
All right.
That's. Go ahead.
I have to. I think the first half of his tenure was a success at Wisconsin. I mean, we were on the brink of the playoff.
He was. It's like when a new president comes into term and skates off the economic residuals of the previous tenant.
But the previous person was Gary Anderson.
For a season or two.
Right. 2 seasons. Right.
2 seasons.
I will say this. Right. 2014, we lose 59-0 to Ohio State. 2017, we're in the Big Ten championship against Ohio State, 45 yards away from the playoffs, right? Paul Chryst does get a little respect for 2017.
What hardware have we brought home under Paul Chryst's tenure?
Some big West titles.
Wow.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
No,
again,
I agree.
Who have been against Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota?
Are you talking about the
West?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Right. Not.
Two New Year's Six Bowl.
I will say the 13-1 season, the Orange Bowl victory, 13-1. That was a good. You will admit though that was a good year though, right?
Great.
Yeah.
That was Miami.
13-1 Orange Bowl year.
But again, none of those things go up on pennants in the stadium.
Right.
That's how I judge the success of and Barry Alvarez and Brett Bielema. Even though I really dislike that human, they brought excellence to this program. They understood what Wisconsin football was.
Right.
I think it lost its way. I think what Paul Chryst failed to do, and we can, after this segment, stop shitting on him.
Yeah.
But, he failed to, A, appreciate the history and legacy of Wisconsin football, what we do best. And he also failed to grow with the game as the game evolved. So he was stuck in this weird hinterland in the middle of those things. And I think for that, he should have been gone a hell of a long time ago.
Okay, so real quick, and then we can move on. Okay. Matt, you're AD. When did you fire? When do you fire Paul Chryst?
I fired Paul Chryst after the 2019 season.
After the loss in the Rose Bowl?
Exactly.
After Oregon, you fire. So after Oregon, even the Rose Bowl.
We shouldn't have been in that Rose Bowl anyways.
Okay. All right. So after losing to Oregon, the Rose Bowl, I mean, that's tough. That's okay. That's pretty tough to lose a Rose but again, after a Rose Bowl.
I can see it's the same logic as firing a coach who had 9 wins last year. You can have short-term success while still fomenting long-term disaster, and I think the writing was on the wall back then. Just watch his milquetoast, tepid presentations and stuff like that. You can see this is not a person who inspires excellence, who is a leader of men. He's just not. He's the guy who takes your ticket at your local movie theater.